Here's my story for December. Francis loved roses. He loved the touch of their soft petals. He loved the smell of their sweet scent. He loved to watch as the rosebuds opened in the warm summer sun. Francis lived with his family on a farm in the south of France. They grew fruit and vegetables and roses. They were famous for their roses. They sold them all over Europe. Rose growing was a family tradition, and Francis wanted to grow up to be a rose grower like his father and his grandfather before him. Yeah, he wanted to grow beautiful flowers just like them. Now, when he was 17, he went with his father to visit a neighbour, another rose grower. And what happened there changed his life. For Francis came across this beautiful rose that he had never seen before. It was a huge yellow bloom. And he asked the rose grower about it. I created that by grafting two other roses together, said the man. Cross-pollination, it's called. Well, Francis went straight home to see if he could cross-pollinate and create such a beautiful rose. He looked up and down all their rose beds, searching for the perfect two roses to combine. At last, he picked two that looked like they would be strong and colourful and combine well. At dawn, the very next day, he gently prized open the petals of these two roses, and he pollinated each of them with the pollen from the other. And then he waited. He waited and he waited. He waited all summer long until the rosehip formed, the fruit. And when it was ready, he cut those hips open and he took out the seeds and he planted them. Then he waited again. He waited for those seeds to sprout and grow. He waited for the plants to bloom. He waited to see if he had created a beautiful new rose. But he hadn't. No, sadly, they were not beautiful. But Francis was not put off. He tried again and again and again. Year after year, he went through the same process. Year after year, he waited until finally, one of the trials was a success. Yes, it happened. It was glorious. The flower was 5 inches across in full bloom. Its soft, velvety petals shaded from a pale ivory through to a warm yellow and ringed with pink. The rose was divine. Well, one June day in 1939, Francis invited rose growers from all over the world to come and see his new rose. No one had ever seen a rose like it. Francis promised that he would send them all cuttings so that they could grow them in their own gardens to to see how well they would transplant from one country, one soil to another. But then catastrophe struck. The German army invaded Poland and World War II began. As quickly as possible, Francis packaged up cuttings of his rose to send to his friends in Germany, in Italy, in the USA. He hoped they would get through. No one knew what was going to happen. But one thing did happen. Francis and his family had to dig up most of their roses. They had to grow more food, for in time of war, more food was needed as some areas were laid waste. Well, throughout the war, Francis had no way of knowing if his plants had got through. He couldn't contact his friends to see what had been happening. Francis and his family were safe in the south of France as the horror of the World War lasted for many years. But finally, in April 1945, the glad tidings spread across Europe. Peace, at least in Europe, had been declared. The war for them was over. Francis rejoiced with his family, with his neighbours, with the whole world. And then, a few months later, he received a very unexpected letter. It was all the way from America, and it said that his rose was blooming beautifully right across the States, from Pennsylvania to California, from the Midwest to the Southern West. What wonderful news! Robert Pyle, an American gardener, an expert in roses, had shared these cuttings with his friends all across the States. And because Robert couldn't contact Francis during the war, he decided he had to give this rose a name. And it just so happened that on the 29th of April, 1945, Robert declared the name of this rose just as peace in Europe was declared in Berlin. He held a ceremony in California and he announced, "We are persuaded that this greatest of all roses should be named for the world's greatest desire, peace." And so the peace rose was born. Experts estimate that 100 million peace rose bushes bloom across the world. Let's hope that soon world peace will follow.